Ladies and gentlemen, for one of the best sports podcasts in the business, subscribe on YouTube to Shakey's Sports Journeys.
Hi everybody and welcome to Life on the Ground with your host Glasgow Pollok. Thank you very much for joining me. Special guest today, fellow Glaswegian, same age as me. We grew up a little bit together in childhood. I welcome to the podcast Mr. Humza Yousaf of the SNP. How are you, sir?
Well, thank you very much for your welcome. I can't believe we're the same age because you have clearly not aged. Well, I have the receding hairline, the expanding waistline, grey hairs, but you look far younger than me, so it must be politics. That,
listen, I didn't look. This was after a visit to the first time to the barbers in a while yesterday, so I wasn't looking like this yesterday. If I'd been on yesterday, I'm sure you would have looked. You would have looked younger than me. So I'm sure you're still you're still looking smart, brother. What I want to do with you today is I want to get to know you a little bit. You know, we see the Humza Yousaf in the Parliament and in front of the cameras and talking and being very, very serious, I would say. Today I want to get to know you a little bit more and, let people see, what kind of person you are and what you think, kind of things you're into, your background, etc. So what I want to start by doing is taking you all the way back, born and bred, Glasgow boy, I believe. Tell me about your background, a bit about your family, and a bit about your childhood, please.
Yeah, no, happy to do so. I suppose I feel like I'm less serious because I'm in my civvies, it's nice to be at home actually sometimes as opposed to out in the campaign trail. We're not allowed out campaigning today. When we're recording this, it's the day of the funeral of the Duke. Childhood. You're right. Born, raised, educated in Glasgow, and lucky to represent Glasgow Pollok as well. Hope to be re-elected to represent. But my childhood, I'm really pleased, was a great one. It was a wonderful one. All praise to God. It was just none of the challenges that my father had. So my father was an immigrant that came to the country, or my grandfather came to the country. Grandfather came from northern India, the northern Punjab of India, a place called Pathankot. My mum, born in Kenya, but of Pakistani origin, also came over. Both of them came in the 1960s. Or both my grandparents, maternal and paternal, came over in the 1960s, and their life, like most immigrants, markedly difficult. A country that they didn't know the language. They often didn't come with much money at all. They often had the burden of having to provide for the family back home, as it was, and quite a racialized society at the time. No blacks, no dogs, no Irish, all that kind of time in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So really difficult time. But I had none of those challenges. I was brought up. Of course, I had racism. I'm sure we'll touch upon some of that. But generally speaking, I grew up. Got two sisters, mum and dad. We were in Pollok Shields in the beginning, which is a very multicultural part of Glasgow, which probably most of your listeners know. But then quickly, parents moved out to the suburbs and grew up in Newton Mearns in quite leafy suburbs. And as I say, for me, I've got such happy memories of my childhood. So I'm really thankful for their efforts, for all that they gave me, for all the struggle that they had. Gave me what I would say was an extraordinarily comfortable life growing up.
What kind of things were you into? What kind of interests did you have? What were your hobbies as a kid?
So just remind me, Gaston, is this audio only or is it also visual?
This is visual, my friend. So your lovely face.
If I turn the camera around,
okay,
your viewers can see that.
I had a feeling you might mention Glasgow Celtic.
That's my European.
I wouldn't be branding that around too much this season.
You're right, and I know your loyalty, so that's true. Actually, maybe I should be careful. But that's my European Cup winners 1967 jersey that I was given.
Oh, nice.
Now, the reason I show you that is because football was what I loved. Watching it, playing it. I wasn't particularly good at it right enough, but watching it, playing it, at all hours of the day. Especially as I grew up. I was in kind of late teens. Into university, I must have played 3 or 4 times a week easily, day after day after day. So love that.
You're talking fives,
7s, sometimes 11s as well, but not particularly great 11s. So that career didn't go very far at all. But certainly 5s and 7s quite a fair bit. And then not intensely political until, truthfully speaking, what was often described at the time as the day that changed the world. I mean, 9/11 completely changed my world, and I suspect changed a lot of people's world. You know, I'm thousands of miles, of course, away from where that terrible tragedy took place. But I was 16 years old at the time it took place, and I remember the day very vividly. And I think for me, you know, it just changed my entire world, because I went from a boy who enjoyed football, you know, talking about all the things that teenage boys talk about with their mates, to I remember very vividly the next day. I think if my memory serves me correct, 9/11 was on a Tuesday. Went to school on the Wednesday morning, and some of my closest friends were just quizzing me, not in a malicious way, but just quizzing me on things that I had no idea about as a 6-year-old. Like, you know, why didn't someone say America? I don't know. Who's the Taliban? Oh, I don't have a clue. Taliban what? You know, I mean, you know, so yeah, no, very much into all the things that you'd imagine a kind of normal Glasgow, you know, teenage boy would have been into. But that to me was a pivotal moment. Probably my life, frankly changed.
Were you quite intelligent always at school? Were you mentioned there obviously that, you know, up till the age of 16, you were not going to perhaps go down the route of politics, but prior to that, were you a smart kid at school? What other aspirations did you maybe have? What other routes did you maybe think about?
Yeah, both my sisters were and are definitely smarter than me. I mean, I was, you know, I did fine. I did well in my IRS, a couple of A's, a couple of B's, that kind of thing. So I was gonna, you know, did well, but I had to work hard at it. Like one of my sisters, my younger sister, I mean, it feels like she just floats into the exam and she gets all A's and A pluses and A stars and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I had to work really, really hard at it. But, you know, I did work hard and my parents supported that. But no, I was not particularly great at the science subjects. And to be honest, when you're a young Asian male, or a young Asian, male or female actually growing up, certainly when we were growing up, Gassim, your parents wanted you to either be a doctor, dentist, lawyer, accountant, or pharmacist. That's it. You had
There's never any hope of that happening with me. But I think it was a wish from my parents. But yeah,
you were even better. Right. You could have been a cricketer. My God, that's like the golden. You know, that's a golden achievement. My goodness, that you managed to achieve, especially after the famous Pakistan Cup victory in, what was it, 92?
92. That was a big that was a big one for us all, wasn't it? That just made the cricket frenzy go crazy. Imran Khan leading Pakistan. I mean, it was crazy over here.
I think if you ask any kind of person of Scottish Pakistani origin, where were you when Pakistan won the World Cup in 92? Everybody will remember. Doesn't matter what age you were. So no, I wanted to be a lawyer, which is not I suppose too unusual in a justice secretary, but I really wanted to be a lawyer. But then 9/11 happened and I got really interested in politics, as I say, because I thought to myself when I was getting asked all these questions, well, I may as well read up on what the heck's going on. And I started to get really into it. And I studied modern studies at school and got, you know, I did really well in it. But I remember it's probably the scariest conversation I had with my parents was, you remember the UCAS form you had to fill out in school?
Yeah.
I think you got 5 options if I remember correctly. I think 4 of them I filled out law. And the last one I snuck in politics at Glasgow Uni. And I got the UCAS form back and I got into both law and politics. So I thought, you know, I had a choice to make, you know, do I do law or do I do politics? And I said to myself, you know what, I really enjoy politics. And you know, law, okay, I think I might enjoy it, but I enjoy politics more at the moment. And I think I can make a difference in it. And I remember it was the scariest conversation. I was so nervous. I would say I was like shaking, taking my paper to my parents because I thought they want me to be a lawyer. Like, there's no way I'm going to get away with saying to them, I want to do politics. I'm going to get what you and I would call the chuppel, right? The slipper. You know, I'm going to get one of those. But I told my mum and dad, but I couldn't be more wrong. You know, when I spoke to my mum and dad about it, my dad especially, mum and dad were really supportive, but dad, you know, dad had been political, you know, for all his days. Again, not frontline politics, but interested in it. And he was saying, no, we need more people, you know, of our persuasion, our colour, our background, our faith involved in politics. And mum as well. I mean, she was a bit more worried. She was a bit more kind of, what kind of job are you going to get? And even now I can remind her, yeah, I did all right. So, but mum and dad are both really supportive, and yeah, studied politics and just got more and more into it from there.
Glasgow Uni then? Glasgow
Uni, yeah. I'm sorry to say I'm one of those ones, but no, I loved it.
So what age were you when you started? Did you go straight from high school straight into uni?
Yeah, straight away. So started uni at 2003. Didn't get involved in party politics. Actually, got more involved because it's 2003. I got more involved in anti-war politics. So I was deeply involved in the anti-war movement. We obviously had the invasion of Afghanistan, but 2003 we had the invasion of Iraq. And I always joke with the police because it's probably the closest I've ever come to being arrested. It was when we were protesting against the Iraq war, and we sat ourselves down and to block off the motorway entrance at Charing Cross. Again, if you know Glasgow's West End, and obviously police had to move us, and luckily I was too quick for the copper, but I got off and stopped that sit down protest. It didn't last more than 5 minutes. But yeah, I got really involved in kind of anti-war politics. I think SNP politics came a bit later on for me.
So you obviously had a passion to make change. You know, that was something that's very, very important for you. I want to touch on how I know you actually. So we're both Muslims.
Yep.
We're both currently fasting at the moment as well. We had a little blether about that before we came on. I actually know you, Humza, from around early teenager years, where I used to come to your house for a religious class, where we would sit down. We had a teacher that came and would teach us a little bit about more about our history and our religion and whatnot. But I had no idea at that point that you were destined to go on. And it's interesting to hear now what you're saying, that up until the age of 16, it wasn't really a route that you were considering going. When you say law, what type of law were you going to? What type of law were you interested in? Human rights?
Yeah, human rights, bang on. Yeah.
You would have been another Amar Anwar then, so it's better that you went down. It's better that you went down the political route, I think.
I definitely would have charged as much as Amar, but yeah.
So Glasgow Uni, great time of life, I'd imagine. Made a lot of friends, involved in something that you were really passionate about. Did you just take to it quite naturally? And was it something that came to you quite natural?
I mean, I loved uni. It was I was always a gobby kid. Always had something to say back and answer back, and even at school I was told off for being too cheeky and answering the teachers back. But when I thought, actually, I'm not answering back. I'm trying to make a point. So I took to politics classes, really enjoyed it. Probably hogged most of the tutorials, unfortunately. I really, really enjoyed that time. And then, you talked about our younger days when we knew each other. Those classes, because the first wave of immigrants that came here, again in the 60s and 70s, they built the infrastructure. You and I will take mosques for granted, won't we? We'll take halal butchers for granted. We can go into any street corner and pick up probably a halal meal in Glasgow relatively easily. But actually, our parents were the ones who did the graft of making all that infrastructure. And I have to say, from my perspective, I often think back, what is it I'm doing for my kids to make sure that they can be comfortable being in Scotland, being a Muslim, being proud of their faith, being proud of their culture, and there's not a conflict between the two. And it's just when you mentioned that kind of when you used to come round to the house, there's so many people now that because we had that upbringing, you yourself included here, have now done phenomenally well for themselves. And I just hope we never ever forget that kind of debt that we owe that generation before us, parents, grandparents as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt. My father is the same, had it a lot tougher than I did. We have no right really ever to complain because we were kind of silver spoon a little bit more compared to what the struggles they went through. So you graduate from university, what year would that have been?
2007. I remember it very well because, so 2007, my final exam, politics exam, I think it was US government and politics, my final exam I had was on polling day 2007.
Okay.
And if you cast your memory back, that was the first election that the SNP ever won in the Scottish Parliament, 2007. So I stayed up all morning. At that time, there was a drink, I don't know if it's still available right now, there was a drink called Iron Brew 32. It was an energy drink. I had a couple of those, crammed in the morning, went to my exam. I had 2 exams that day, and basically from 10 in the morning till, roughly speaking, 3, 4 in the afternoon, sat those exams, went straight from the exam hall into a polling station in Nicola Sturgeon's patch in Glasgow South Side. Went into a polling station. For a polling station, I was there from maybe 5, 6 till polling closed till 9, 9:30. The polls closed at 10. Went straight to the count. I remember it was in the SECC at the time. And the euphoria as the SNP, the results started to come in. We won that election by 1 seat. 1 seat. It was so tight. And there was a big problem back then with electronic voting. It was the first time it was used. Anyway, and I remember the euphoria. And I was so lucky because I went from, I mean, honestly, I'm so blessed when I think about it, because I went from literally my final exam, hadn't even graduated yet, my final exam, to the SNP winning an election the same day or the day after when the results came in, to being offered a job on the Monday, and I thought, my God, like, I'm the luckiest guy that's ever lived, and that's why I count my blessings, because so many doors have been opened for me. And I just hope that, I always stay grateful for it. You never take these things for granted. But no, not phenomenal how lucky. I'm the boy that got lucky, really, and I'll never forget that.
Well, I think luck's you always need a bit of luck, but I think hard work, dedication was part of that as well. Listening to you coming through, you were clearly very passionate about it. I mean, you decided to try and block off a motorway once, so that tells us everything we need to know, Humza, about what you were destined, what route you were wanting to go. So pretty much from day one, then your senior was would have been First Minister Nicola Sturgeon.
So I worked for her. Well, no, I didn't work for her initially. I worked for late Bashir Ahmed, but she was the one who really mentored me a fair bit. She was the one that took me out and said, after the election result, and said, interesting, I don't know if I've ever spoken about this, but she offered me the job, and initially I turned it down. It was to work with Bashir Ahmed. It was nothing to do with the late Bashir Ahmed. I loved him. He was great and a wonderful man. But I had another kind of job offer that I was thinking about that was overseas potentially. And, I thought to myself, maybe I'd like to try my hand at being overseas and then coming back to politics here. But then Nicola Sturgeon took me out, and I think the kebab shop is still there. She took me out for a chicken kebab at Lahore Kebab House on Albert Drive. I think it's still there.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah. And she chatted to me over that and said, look, we really want you. We think you're, she was really kind and flattering. And we said, look, it's a great place for you to develop. As well. So I thought, look, I'm not going to say no. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon, blooming heck, is asking me, so that's that done. So yeah, just went for it. And the first person I worked for was the late Bashir Ahmed, the first ever ethnic minority member of the Scottish Parliament to ever be elected. And it was a great honour. Sadly, he passed away halfway through his term, but a great honour being by his side through really historic years for us.
So what was your kind of early challenges? What kind of early inroads did you make, and what success did you have?
I learned so much in those first couple of years. I always find that the best teacher is the one where you don't even know you're being taught. So I never really realised I was being taught by Bashir Ahmed, but I was, through his character, through little bits and bobs that he would just do here and there with me and for me. He was just a wonderful man. Most of your listeners and viewers probably won't have seen much of him because his political career was only a couple of years in the Scottish Parliament, but just the kindest, most gentle soul. Very different to the politics you see now, and I'm guilty of this. We're very snashy with our politics. Sometimes we're quite aggressive with our politics, and it doesn't make for a good environment. Whereas he was the absolute antithesis of that. He was just warm to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a Tory or. I'll tell you one story. You've seen that 2007 election.
Yep.
There was a group there standing. There was a group of candidates that stood for the BNP, obviously the racist far right British National Party, and nobody was having anything to do with them. They were standing in their corner by themselves. Obviously, the others, we all talk. Though we're different political parties, we all talk to each other and talk about the result and what's going on and all that kind of stuff. But they were very much isolated in the corner. And I remember thinking to myself, it was like maybe midnight. I was thinking, where's Bashir gone? Bashir going, I was trying to look for him, try to call him, couldn't get through to him on the phone. And eventually he turns up and he's got a tray and he's got maybe 10, those styrofoam cups of tea on them. And he goes over to the BNP guys and he goes and gives them tea. Just a gent, just a total gent. He knew who they were and what they were. So I learned a lot in those formative years, more how to carry myself. Look, I don't think I've lived up to Bashir's legacy in terms of how to conduct yourself, but you learn a lot. And I was lucky. I was surrounded by great people. The current First Minister, I got to work with her after Bashir's death. Even the former First Minister, there's challenges, of course, with him, but I was his parliamentary liaison officer. And you learn a lot working with people that are, it can be tough and hard working for some of these people, but you learn, certainly from Nicola Sturgeon. I think I've probably learned more from her than anybody else.
Something I really want to touch on. Now, we can laugh about it now, but at the time, I really did. I felt for you, man. I felt for you. And that was when you were Transport Minister. when the big freeze struck.
Oh yeah.
Talk to me about that a little bit, because I mean, I seen you in the news. You would see you on the morning, and by the evening, your tie was a bit down here somewhere. Your face looked like you know, and everybody was piling into you. It was all Humza Yousaf's fault that this big freeze has come and everything's come to a standstill, and you were getting absolutely slated. Talk to me about the pressure of that kind of time and what challenges you were facing during that.
Yeah, so look, ministerial life is definitely pressured, and transport minister is one of the most pressured jobs you can have. I remember, I'll answer the question actually before I do that. I remember when I got appointed transport minister, and again, I don't think I really speak about this very often. So you get a call from the First Minister saying, look, come to Butte House, her residence, and you don't know what job you're going to get. You know, it's a bit of speculation, but you never know what job you're going to get until you arrive and you hear from the First Minister. So all these other jobs had gone, and there was only kind of a few left, and they'd been announced, and only a few left. So I go into the First Minister's drawing room in Butte House, and she comes in, she kind of gives me a hug, and says, I say, how you doing? She says, all right, all right. She goes, so look, the job I'm about to give you, this is her exact words. She goes, the job I'm about to give you it, and it's not because I don't like you. I'm thinking, what job can it be that you're just about to give me and say to me, don't worry, it's not because I don't like you. And then she goes, we'll give you transport minister. And I won't lie, there was a couple of expletives and profanities. I wouldn't repeat them on your program for me. And that wasn't because I wasn't going to enjoy the job, and I thoroughly enjoyed being a transport minister. It was just because, as you say, if there's a train that breaks down at rush hour, it's the transport minister's fault. If there's ice in the road, it's the transport minister's fault. You name it. You know, if the transport minister's not there, putting the grit in the road, then you're going to hear about it, you know. So that was a tough job. So the Beast from the East was, I mean, that for me was probably one of the most formative experiences of my life, in the sense that, you know, that intense pressure. And I think for me, what I was really keen to do at that time was to say, look, I'm just going to make sure I'm visible. Like you say, from the morning, the moment people wake up to the moment they go to bed, I want them to see me telling them that they should be travelling, because that was the main message at the time. There's a red warning, ended up being a red warning, weather warning. And, you know, and we're in this control room in Queensferry Crossing. It's got dozens of television screens that show us all parts of the motorway network. And I'm telling people not to travel. And then I see a Next Home and an IKEA van go past. And again, I'm swearing my head off, picking up the phone to take my officials, get on to IKEA, you know, businesses, and tell them what the hell are they, you know. And so my job was just to make sure that I was there telling people 24/7, do not travel, don't take a risk, You know, if your employer, let people go home early. And you know what, for all the criticism that I might have got at the time, the amount of people that wrote in, and again, I can't repeat this on your program fully, but I got one guy, I remember, he emailed me in. No, he tweeted me actually, probably still got the tweet. And he says, you know, I still think you're a CUNT. That's what he said. I still think you're a CUNT, but you did pretty decent on that job on the transport. I thought, from a Glaswegian perspective, that's probably as good a compliment as you can get.
That is definitely as good a compliment.
It was a heck of an experience, put it that way.
You done well. You done well. I just, looking back now, it does make me chuckle a wee bit, because you poor guy, you really were taking the blows, but you, like you said, you were very visible, and that's the main thing. Why did you ultimately join the SNP? What's your main reasons for joining the SNP?
I remember it very well. I remember the exact moment. In fact, I could probably tell you when I thought I'm going to join. So my dad was actually the SNP from the 1970s. He was actually the first member of the Asian community in Glasgow to ever join the SNP.
All right, okay.
Yeah, he just believed in it, but he never forced it on us. You know, he just, my mum was Labour until probably the Iraq War. No, actually, probably just before that. Probably just before that. Maybe I think she fell out of love with Tony Blair slightly before that. But you know, she was Labour like most folk, and then fell out of love. But Dad never forced it upon us. But I remember the exact moment for me was a protest that took place down in London. We were protesting against the Iraq War, and we were going past the Houses of Parliament. There was a massive demonstration. I think well over 1 million people at this demonstration, anti-war demonstration. And when we went past the House of Commons, that was just a light bulb went off. And I thought to myself, most of Scotland is against the Iraq War. I had all these polls coming out, people saying that we should be involved in the invasion. Yet our sons and daughters are being sent away to fight in this war. And many of them, unfortunately, coming back in body bags, coffins. And yet I have to go down to London to protest against it because that's where the decision's made. I have to travel 450, 500 miles. I thought to me, that can't be right. Surely if the country I belong to doesn't want to go to war, we shouldn't go to war. Our sons and daughters shouldn't have to give their lives up for a war we don't agree with. And that was it for me. I think I filled out a membership form, that day, that night. Just like, no, I'm joining. Because, for me, it's got to be independence. And the only party that was advocating independence at that time was the SNP.
Well, that was going to be my next question. We've just gone through Brexit, which I feel, personally, in my own opinion, was a very racially fueled campaign, and one that I don't feel nice to be part of. And the question I guess I have is, you've got two main opposition parties, Tories and Labour. Tories, I think it's pretty obvious what they stand for and what they have pushed forward. And Brexit's been the main thing that they've achieved, which I think so far has been a bit of a disaster. And then you've got Labour, who I think are still trying to pull people back from what happened with Iraq and convince the public that we're nice now, and we're not wanting to do any of that stuff anymore. And then you've got the SNP, who I think have grown in popularity significantly over the last couple of years. Why, though, is independence so important?
It's just fascinating that we're having this discussion at the moment. A matter of days ago, in fact, no, it was yesterday. I'm losing my days here. It was yesterday. There was a poll that was out in the Times, and it showed that the Conservatives in England had a 14-point lead over the Tories. 14-point lead. So if there was an election tomorrow, they would have a majority, the Tories, of 102, so a massive majority. And to me, that is just one demonstration of why we need to be independent. So for most of my adult life, so I'm 36 years old. No, forget most of my adult life. For most of my life, full stop, I've had Tory governments. Scotland has had Tory governments rule over us that we didn't vote for. So Scotland didn't vote Tories. In fact, some of those elections, we voted, almost 90% of our seats were either Labour or, as currently stand, most of our seats are SNP seats. But yet we've got a UK government, Tory government that is bringing forward policies that are harming really the poorest in our society, from the rape clause to the bedroom tax to universal credit. I see it all the time. I see it in my constituency. I suspect every MSP, it doesn't matter whether you represent Selkirk, Stirling or Shetlands, you see the poverty in your community, and that's coming from the austerity of a government that we never voted for. And that to me is it. If I was to boil it down into a sentence, I would just say, look, surely all the decisions about Scotland should be made by the people of Scotland. Full stop. Doesn't matter if you came here a year ago, 10 years ago, 25 generations ago. It's your country, your home. You've got a vested interest in it because your family's here, your children are going to school here, you're working here, you're studying here. So ultimately, surely all of the decisions, whether it's about health education, which of course are currently devolved, or whether it's about foreign affairs, defence, financial economy, financial levers, taxation, social security, these things should be decided by the people who live here. And that to me is the simplest argument.
So here's what an SNP voter kind of things that you'll face. They're going to ruin this country. They're going to drive this country into the ground. It's going to be an economic disaster. You're mad. You're nuts to vote for SNP. This is just a game of independence for them. Think about the future. Think about your kids. Now, I am pretty clear cut that I don't want the Tories to be deciding the future of my children and future of my grandchildren and whatnot. But when people get this said to them, it must cast a little bit of doubt, because it's the fear of the unknown that, what will happen? Is it going to be like we voted Brexit, and how many people now are saying they voted for Brexit, have been interviewed on TV and on radio and whatnot, and are like, oh, if I had the chance again, I wouldn't have voted Brexit. So I think there's a fear there probably for the people of voting towards an independence of just the fear of the unknown. How do we respond to those people, Humza, that say that to us?
Well, a couple of things. First, I'd say, I've heard all of that and obviously a lot worse. But I have to say now, it's very interesting that a lot of and I would call them lies that were told in 2014 against independence are just crumbling away. So people would say, look, the only way to guarantee your EU membership was to vote no to independence. Now look what's happened. People said, and the head of the Better Together campaign, the pro-union campaign in 2014 said, Boris Johnson will never be Prime Minister of the UK. That's just fantasy stuff from the SNP. Boris Johnson's Prime Minister of the UK. So, I think one by one, people now kind of see through a lot of the lies that were told. On the unknown, and Scotland's such a small country and it's too poor and too weak and all that kind of stuff, I always say to folk, look, just look at the facts. See, if you look at the 10 wealthiest countries in the OECD, 7 of them are either Scotland size or similar to Scotland size or smaller. Some of the most successful countries in the world are our smaller European nations that are in Scandinavia, for example, got a population similar to Scotland's. So why is it that every other country that is our size, that is in Europe, can thrive, be wealthy, can stand on their own 2 feet? Don't get me wrong, they'll have challenges. You name me one country that doesn't have a challenge. You try to tell me the United Kingdom doesn't have any challenges. I mean, of course we'll have challenges. But why can a country like Scotland that has, yes, oil reserves, that has some of the best universities in the world, has food and drink exports that are worth billions of pounds a year, from salmon to whiskey and everything in between, that has some of the best research and development in Europe, if not probably the world? Why can a country with our tourism sector's huge, whether it's people coming here for golf or the Highlands or city breaks, Glasgow attracts some of the biggest conferences in the world. We've got COP26 coming this year to Glasgow, the climate change conference. Why is it that we think every other country that doesn't have half of those resources can do okay, but somehow Scotland would be a complete basket case? I just don't buy it. I also don't sell people a lie. I don't say to people, look, it's going to be a land of milk and honey. Manna will be falling from the sky. It'll be great. It'll be, of course we'll have challenges, but at least we'll have all the levers in our own hands, all the financial levers, taxation levers, social security levers, health, education, which obviously are currently devolved, have all the levers to adjust to those challenges and to take on those challenges. They would be in our hands, not in a government that's 450 miles away, that frankly, let's be honest, Scotland is an afterthought at the best of times.
Good answer, Humza, I think. Okay, so I've got some questions that have actually been given to me from some people who are keen for me to ask you these questions.
Okay.
So the first question I have is the education policy. I've been asked to ask you, would Humza Yousaf send his kids to a public school, being a private school boy himself, and the SNP have been criticised in the past for public schooling? Do you have enough confidence with your own kids going to public school?
So my stepdaughter goes to public school, so they already go to public school. My youngest is too young for schooling at the moment, but when she goes to school, it'll very much be a public school. There'll just be no doubt about it. So the answer to the question is yes, but judge me by my deeds. I mean, my stepdaughter, who's largely in our care during the week when it comes to our schooling, she's very much at public school. So for me, I don't hide away from the fact that I went to private school. It's open. It's anybody can see that. I'm thankful to my parents for the opportunity. I know why they did it. It's not unusual again for the kind of first wave of immigrants to often want to try to get what they would think is the best education for their kids. And for them, private school was something that was completely unattainable when they were younger. But if they have the wealth to do it, then they'll do it. But for me, I just wouldn't do it. I've got absolute faith in our schools here in Scotland. I think they do a phenomenal job. Our teachers are brilliant. We're making great progress when it comes to closing the attainment gap. There's still challenges, of course, there is. Nobody doubts that, particularly over the last year. But no, I've got every faith. A personal choice for me would be, not to send my children to private school.
Okay. Alex Salmond's new party. Is it a legitimate threat? Do you see yourself working with them in future? Nicola Sturgeon hasn't ruled it out, or was that taken out of context?
So what Nicola Sturgeon said, and I agree with it, is look, Alex Salmond's been cleared of any criminal conduct. No doubt about that. And you know, he has been cleared by a jury of his peers. But of course, during that trial and through some of what he's told Nicola Sturgeon, he clearly engaged in inappropriate behaviour with women. No two ways about it. Not criminal, but clearly inappropriate. And you know, Nicola Sturgeon simply said that he should really apologise for that. And if he apologises for that, then that is the first step to seeing somebody is remorseful for their actions. To be honest, I'd rather not rely on any party. I want to be able to stand on a mandate and hopefully get a majority from that mandate to then push that mandate forward. That's why we're being relentless in asking people, to if they want to see an SNP government, then you've got to cast both votes to the SNP. If you vote for Alaba or Greens or whoever else, well, you've got every right to do so. Of course, it's a democracy at the end of the day. That if you do that, then you're gaming the system. You're gambling on Scotland's future. There's one thing I know, and I know this for absolute certain, is that Boris Johnson's only terrified of one thing. He's terrified of an SNP majority government, not SNP plus Alaba plus Greens plus this plus that. He's terrified of an SNP majority. So if we know that the best way to get that is voting SNP both votes, that worked in 2011, then people should do the same in 2021 in these elections coming up. That's, I suppose, the only strong argument I'd make.
Disaster that was Brexit and leaving the European Union. How would you deal with it, leaving the rest of the UK, due to the fact that a lot of our trade is done within the UK?
Well, it should be said, though, the EU market's 7 times bigger than the UK market, right enough. But look, my kind of answer to this one is, when it comes to negotiating with the UK post-independence, it's not about being intransigent. The problem with the hard Brexit, if you work your mind back to when Theresa May was Prime Minister, they had all these red lines they were not going to cross. These are our red lines. We're going to make a hard Brexit. So remembering the country voted, I think, was it 52% for Brexit? It's not an overwhelming mandate. It's a majority, but it's not an overwhelming mandate. Instead of trying to get what you might describe as a softer Brexit, she went for the right extreme to try to appease the right wing of the Tory party. Went for a really, really hard Brexit. For me, when it came to independence negotiations, the first thing I would do is make sure that we consulted and worked with even those people that voted no, and with the other political parties that supported staying in the Union. Because you know what? We're now all Team Scotland, right? The results happened. Let's now work together to get the best deal for Scotland. The type of independent Scotland that we want to see. And let's be pragmatic and sensible about it. And ultimately, pragmatism works out. It's in nobody's self-interest. Let's take one example. Let's take one of the most contentious issues, a border between the two countries. It would be in nobody's interest whatsoever for there to be checkpoints, for there to be a physical barrier, a physical border, a physical barrier at the border between Scotland and England. In the same way, there's no interest for anybody to have a border on the island of Ireland, between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And ultimately, because it's in nobody's interest, pragmatism works out. It happened between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Okay, got there in the very last minute of when the transition period ended. But ultimately, you could drive between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland now, and there would be no physical checkpoints, no physical hard barrier. And I think that's what ultimately is, when it comes to independence, the pragmatism and ultimately the self-interest, economic, social self-interest, ultimately would dictate. So we wouldn't go into independence negotiations demanding, the equivalent of a hard Brexit. We would take a reasonable, pragmatic approach to how we would want independence to look for an independent country in the future.
What are the chances of rejoining the European Union? It was a very sad time. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon obviously went over there to better the relations the best she could, and it was a term used, leave a light on for Scotland. What are the chances of that happening, do you think?
I think extraordinarily high. So, I belong to a party that wants to rejoin the European Union. In fact, we're the only major party that now wants that. All the other parties have kind of given up on that, but I would want us to rejoin the EU. I just see so much benefit, from travel to culture to, of course, the economic advantage of it as well. But look, we'd have to discuss that with the EU. I'm certain, having heard the very warm words that we've heard recently from very senior Europeans in the European Union, in the European Commission, in the European Parliament, all saying that they could absolutely see an independent Scotland coming back in the future. I don't think there'd be major obstacles. It'd be a process probably to go through, but I don't think it would be the kind of long drawn out process that our opposition claim. Because if you think about it, Scotland belonged to the EU for 40 years. We fulfilled the criteria. So in whose interest would it be for there to be a long drawn out process for an independent Scotland to rejoin? Particularly when we've got so much resource and that Europe would want to of course trade with us, and we would want to trade with Europe. So yeah, I mean, I would want us to, and I'd absolutely love us to rejoin the EU. For me, independence is not about being insular. It's about looking out, being global, being internationalist, and that's the type of independence I want.
So what does an independent Scotland look like in your ideal scenario? What will Scotland be like? What will be the positives and what are the potential negatives?
So the way I look at it is, I think about my daughters, and I think when they're older, because life gets more complex when you're older, right? You maybe got rent payments to make, you got a job to find, you got a mortgage maybe to pay for. You get pressures. Maybe you get life throws a curveball your way. You maybe have to rely on the welfare state. Maybe you become a carer because of some unfortunate circumstances. Maybe you yourself end up, unfortunately, with a disability because, again, of the circumstances that befall you. And I think of my girls, and I think when they're older, facing some of these challenges, I hope, to goodness that they're protected from all of that. But let's say they face those challenges when they're grown up. I want them to live in a country where the decisions about all of those matters are theirs. That they know that when they put the X at the ballot box, that the government ultimately that they as a country vote for will be the one that looks after their interests. And for me, that is the biggest benefit of independence, that we don't have to worry about a government 500 miles away that is so disconnected from us, that's taking the country in a completely different direction that we just didn't vote for. And ultimately, it means a country that I would hope would be progressive. I think we've demonstrated that in the 14 years that we've been in government. I think we'd be a country that would be internationalist. I don't think we'd be countries that would just, be interventionist in our foreign policy. I think we'd want to be a good global citizen. That, countries like New Zealand, for example, have shown that you can show leadership on many issues. I'd like us to show leadership on climate change, for example, internationally. We've got really good climate change. We've got the world leading climate change, actually, targets that we're meeting, fulfilling, and pursuing. So that's the kind of independence I see. I see a country that will have its challenges, and never tell people that it's going to be a country without any challenges. That's a lie, right? I'm not going to sell people a lie. But when those challenges come, we're at least going to have all of the tools in our toolbox to deal with those challenges.
It's been fun talking politics. I appreciate your honesty and all the questions you've answered. I want to finish by talking a bit about football.
Yeah.
Let's lighten it up a little bit.
Sure.
The Euros are coming.
Yeah.
Are we going to get full crowds in at Hampden? I'm hearing positives.
So maybe not quite full crowds by that point, but we definitely want to have crowds in there. We will, touch wood, if things keep going the same way they're going, we'll absolutely have crowds in the stadium. Might have to be limited because we may still have social distancing, so people may still have to sit 2 meters apart, etc. So but we want the Tartan Army in there. I mean, they're our biggest asset. They're the additional man or woman on the field for us. So and I love football, and I can vividly remember that Serbia game. I imagine, like most of us that most of your viewers that are watching and listening, I think my foot is still sore from kicking the sofa, and Serbia scored in the 89th minute, right enough. So no, we definitely want crowds in there. Crowds will, hopefully, again, touching wood, that things continue in the trajectory they're in. Crowds should be in for the Euros.
What are chances? Are you hopeful?
We're obviously
for Scotland to get through the group?
We're obviously going to win, which would be Go through the group. No,
Well, that's what a lot of people are saying. It's written in the stars, really, isn't it? It's been so long since we made a tournament.
You know, obviously I want Scotland to progress as far as they can, and this is, I mean, I'm not just saying this, but I mean, this is, if not the best, one of the best squads I've seen in my life on this planet, for my 36 years, you know, on this earth. This is one of the best. I mean, some of the players we've got that are playing for us at the highest level, not just the captain, I mean, he's phenomenal, of course, but that squad, some of them are playing at the
top end, Manchester United, all over the
place. Yeah, in the best leagues in the world. So, you know, we should be really optimistic about how far Scotland can go. Absolutely. But you know what? Even if we didn't get past the group stages, I don't care. I mean, we need a lift. We need that. I mean, the excitement of watching your team. Me and all my girls, you know, and my wife, we've all got the Scotland strips.
Nice.
Ready to go. You know, and I'm going to love it. I'm just going to enjoy it. And however far we get, I can't wait.
Just to finish on, I've not really touched on it, but it's been very prevalent and very much a big issue. And that has been racism in recent times. We've just seen what's happened with Rangers football player Glenn Kamara being racially abused on the pitch. The whole taking a knee thing is now starting to, people are kind of suggesting it doesn't really have it's not really making anything change. Social media has become a really nasty place with, I mean, you must get a lot of it. I mean, I seen a post that Amar Anwar did yesterday where some of the things that were being said to him are just disgusting. If we were to get in a situation of becoming independent, how much control can a government have over the social media platforms? Because one of the biggest things just now out there is why you go to open anything out there, anything you go to get, you have to be able to give some sort of identification to prove who you are, prove your address. But with social media, I could go today after I finish this podcast and open 20 different accounts, which I could talk whatever I want from them. Surely that's got to be the main target issue. Is that something that the government could have an influence on?
Social media platforms definitely have to do more. They you know, Twitter especially. I mean, Twitter for me is frankly a cesspit. Now I'm on it because, you know, it's a great way to communicate your message out to folk. And actually in the early days of Twitter, you'd actually have some good engagement, even on very difficult issues. People would say to me, oh, I really respect the fact that you took the time to, I don't agree with you, I like the fact that you replied back to me. So give them a kind of instant access to a politician that you wouldn't normally get. But it's now, just become a cesspit. Any post I make on Twitter, I mean, I'm just met by, you know, a barrage of abuse. Now, some of it will be racial and Islamophobic. Some of it will just be abuse. But if I was walking down the street, I wouldn't let somebody just keep shouting abuse at me. No, I would take some action. I'd go to police. I would, you know, tell them to stop. I would, you know, there would be some sort of intervention that I could have to stop that abuse. But I mean, I'm talking about every day there'll be hordes of messages come my way, and I'm just one individual. You mentioned Amar Anwar. He gets it terribly. You know, Glenn Kamara, you know, these guys have been getting abused, and full solidarity to any player, but, you know, full solidarity at the moment to Glenn Kamara, and Kamar Roof for what they've had to face in terms of their racism. Just disgusting, the most vile, just the most vile hatred that anybody could face. So yeah, I agree with your central point. The social media companies need to do more. Can governments do more to pressure them? I mean, I'd be keen to meet with the social media companies and try to see what influence we can bring to bear. But ultimately, of course, you know, we're limited. We could always look at legislation. At the same time, I'll take your point about, you know, anonymous accounts being opened up. The only thing I'd say to that is, you know, I do know one victim of domestic abuse, for example, and she said to me, there's no way I could go in my own name, and I had to go in anonymously and talk about my abuse, and that's where I found support. People tell me, you don't need to stick in this relationship, you know, whoever you are, there's support available for you, here's Scottish Women's Aid, yada, yada, yada. And she said, I could never have done that if I had to give my real name, real address. My partner would have found out, I would have been dead. You know, so it's a really tough one, really tough one. But there's definitely more the social media companies can do.
I agree. I hope that is something that gets taken seriously, because I think I worry more about the next generation, my kids growing up, etc., that they face the kind of stuff that gets being branded around social media. But I think it is good that we have a lot more campaigns out there and people are doing their best to try and raise awareness and stop racism once for all. Hamza, Yousaf, it's been a pleasure, sir. It's been a pleasure. I think you've been very open and honest. You've answered all my questions. Not completely with your political hat on all the time. I felt it was a bit more of the person behind the politics. You know, that you were very honest, and I thoroughly appreciated that. Thank you for coming on the show. I wish you all the very, very best with your campaign. Obviously, you're going to be back out knocking doors come Monday morning. At least the weather's nice. You can't really complain. Best of luck with the rest of your Ramadan. We've got today will be 4 down, 26 to go after this. And yeah, I look forward to catching up with you at some point, not on the side of a screen, maybe in person when regulations and things are starting to be lifted a little bit more.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thank you so much, and great speaking to you, and all the best for Ramadan.
Thank you very much, brother.